Thanks for joining today. I was super excited to talk about 2021 roadmap for sales and marketing in industrials. Today, I've got Dave Carr with me, the VP of Marketing here at Klyck. I'm Paul Tkach, the Director of Sales and Business Development. And super excited. We have got some good chats today, some good topics around roadmap for industrial sales and marketing. And just a note, if you do have any questions, please drop them below. We have a Q&A box. We'll do our best to get around to them and answer them live. But if we don't answer them live, we will write back to you and get those answered. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dave and you can take it from here, Dave.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Well, like Paul said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Really glad to have you join. My name is Dave Carr. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at Klyck.io. And I'm really excited to go over this topic today about the roadmap for industrial sales and marketing. This is an ebook, a condensed version of our ebook that we published earlier this year. And it has hands down been one of our best pieces of content. I wrote most of this ebook myself. I spent about 11 to 12 years in the industrial segment myself before joining Klyck.io. So I was with GE Energy for a period of time. I used to sell electrical switchgear and handle marketing and channel in that world. I also ran marketing for a very large electrical distributor here in the United States. So I have a lot of experience in the industrial world and still have lots of friends. Most of our customers actually here at Klyck.io are in industrial as well. So it's fun to talk about the changes. So many things have evolved post-COVID, and I'm looking forward to going over those. We have a lot to cover today. So what I'll do, as Paul mentioned, we'll take Q&A as we go. We have 6 different sections that we'll go through. So we'll take a pause at the end of each of those, make sure that everybody that has questions, we can get those answered, and we'll keep the momentum flowing. So on that note, let me go ahead and share a screen here, and we will hop right into the discussion. So, all right, Paul, am I good on screen share?
Yep, everything's looking good.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned, throughout this, as I go through some of the details, I'll reference parts in our ebook. I'm going to send out a link to everyone that joins with the original ebook link in the show notes and description that can get you back to all that information. If you want to download it and go through it yourself, I would highly encourage that, again, just because there's so much content there and we're going to be condensing. So before we hop straight into that, I'll tell you just really quickly about us. Klyck.io, we are a sales enablement platform designed specifically for B2B sales reps. And our goal is to help reps close more deals and build better relationships with their customers. So we'll talk a little bit about sales enablement as we go through the roadmap. It's one of 3 big systems that we suggest to all industrial manufacturers or distributors. So I'll give you more info there, but essentially what sales enablement does is it helps you turn your marketing and sales content into conversations with your clients. It helps you collect a massive amount of data and turn that into direction to run your business. And it also helps you take more general sales reps and help turn them into sales experts. So we'll give a little bit more insight on that as we go. But first and foremost, I mentioned there are 6 big topics that we will focus on today. The first being sales and marketing alignment. And that's where really all of this roadmap begins and ends, is the unison of those 2 teams working together. We'll talk a good bit about content and communication strategy. Creating great content and distributing great content is an integral part of a good industrial sales and marketing strategy, a modern sales and marketing strategy. We'll talk a lot about data, both in marketing and in sales, how you can use it in your systems. We'll talk about what those supporting systems are. So we'll spend a good bit of time talking about CRM, marketing automation, sales enablement, how those systems work together. And then we'll wrap up with some discussion around sales training, which has changed massively post-COVID, and then how all of these help lead to the ultimate goal, which is better conversations with your customers. So hopping into the first segment here, we'll talk about sales and marketing alignment. And again, this is one of the most important things that you need to focus on in your strategy, simply because if you don't have marriage between these 2 teams in the modern environment, you're not going to be set up for much success. And a lot of the reasons for this are just the massive amount of change that has occurred in the B2B sales cycle. So we're now seeing anywhere between 70 to 80% of the buying cycle completed before an interested party ever contacts a sales team. So that early stage of the cycle or the early stage of the funnel is really where marketing lives. That's a lot of focus on creating great content, distributing content, creating awareness, building your brand, and then having that handoff to sales as individuals come through the funnel. So the path to sales and marketing alignment is very, very important. There are 5 big concepts, and if you want to dive more into this, I will include a link to several resources we have. We actually recently did a webinar just on sales and marketing alignment. We have various ebooks on this. But the 5 big steps are establishing communication between your teams, ensuring that those teams are sharing a common strategy and goals, putting marketing first. And again, that's because so much of that buying cycle occurs early on with non-sales touch points. Then moving down into implementation of processes, tools for sales and marketing alignment to make sure that there's stickiness factor, and then ultimately moving more to a flywheel type concept versus just a traditional funnel. So if you want more details on that, again, I'll include some resources that you can dive a little bit deeper. But those are some initial thoughts to get you on your way. When I talk about marketing and again, how important it is to create great content for early stage funnel. 3 big things to focus on here are not only creating the great content that tells the story of your organization, but also managing how you fill top of funnel with distribution. So I'll go a little bit deeper into this when we get into the content portion of the webinar. But basically, the ultimate goal of great marketing is to attract customers, tell a story, and bring into top of funnel some prospects that ultimately can push down through your to your sales team as valid, ideal customer profiles. To do that, you're going to need to use tools such as marketing automation, CRM, sales enablement, and we'll get further into that. But all of those elements really come into play for driving that better sales and marketing alignment. So why should you align sales and marketing teams? Just some data points on why that's so important. Firms with good sales and marketing alignment typically drive about 32% higher revenue than firms that did not have good alignment in place with their teams. They have higher win rates, so about 38% higher win rates on your sales pipeline. They grow much faster, 27% faster than companies that don't have good alignment. And they also have a much higher customer retention at 36%. So again, extremely important to be bringing those 2 teams together. And if you want more details on how to do that, again, I would highly recommend that you check out some of those other resources because we give a lot of tips and tricks on how to accomplish that. But if you don't have that stone in place, it's going to be hard to build everything else that we're going to talk about in this webinar. So I would highly encourage you to focus. So content and communication strategy. So how does marketing begin to pull together all of those activities that are going to build funnel? That's where we're going to move next. But really quickly, Paul, do we have any questions or anything that's come in so far?
Not just yet, but just a reminder that there is the Q&A below. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Okay, sounds great. So content and communication strategy. First of all, we've talked a good bit about this new environment and how different it is now post-COVID. Some of the things that we're seeing change are not only how that buying cycle is getting longer, but also the amount of content that's being consumed in B2B to lead those buyers down through the funnel. So based on some research that we've done and also research that we've sourced from groups like Aberdeen and Gartner, we're now seeing that there are as much as a minimum of 5 high value pieces of content being consumed by a buyer before they ever make a decision. And what we mean by high value pieces of content are really well created ebooks, webinars, if you have a podcast, if you have customer case studies, if you have landing pages on your website that include video content or other types of educational, informative content, that is the absolute number one sticky factor for the modern buyer. One of the reasons of that is just the change in demographics of the buyers that are making up modern B2B buying committees. So one really shocking stat, if you've never seen this before, is that up to 73% of the individuals in modern B2B buying committees are now millennials. So as we all know, millennials buy extremely differently than baby boomers or even Gen X. There's a lot more upfront research. And again, that's focusing on why that percentage of the buying process completed early on is self-service. A big influencer of that is the demographic change. So one of the things I've seen, at least, is a trend in the market, is that B2B companies and now industrial companies are really looking more to B2C type sales, or excuse me, marketing and sales process to lead buyers through the funnel. So the same way that we want to go to YouTube or go to social media to find out information about something that we're looking to buy for our own personal purchases, we're now taking that same mentality over to B2B as well. So again, creating content and distributing that content, both from a marketing perspective and from the perspective of putting that content in the hands of your salespeople, is an extremely important piece of how to bring together that roadmap. One shocking data point on this as well, when we talk about content, from a marketing perspective, I think you typically see marketing teams do a pretty average or fair job of distributing that and getting stickiness with it. But where that really breaks down is when it goes to sales. So what we're seeing is that anywhere between 60 to 70% of content that's being created by marketing goes completely unused by your sales team. And that's a problem, right? So if content is one of the most important things you can be distributing to your prospects to close deals, why would you stop when you get to sales? So that is really laying the foundation of what I'd like to talk about through the rest of this webinar, which is how do we continue to take that mentality of marketing and move it down into the sales process, because the companies that are creating roadmaps to solve for that are the companies that we see winning in the marketplace. So in terms of how marketing can help pave the way to set the stage for this, we've talked a lot about how creating the need to create high quality content, but then also where do you distribute it? So one thing I like to focus on is simply the breakdown of educational content, engaging content, and then content that solidifies proof of value. And each of these different types of content have different places in the cycle. So if you're trying to target prospects when they're in the awareness stage, educational content is the way to do that. If you have buyers that are moving further down the funnel and they're getting into consideration, they're thinking about making decisions, that's where you need to have more engaging content. Things like checklists, how to get started guides, 5 best ways to accomplish XYZ. That type of content really becomes important to buyers when they get to consideration. And then at decision, proof of value, mainly what I'm focusing on there are things like case studies, customer testimonials, any sort of content that you can create that shows, hey, here's an example of how our company has solved a problem that is much like yours, right? This is becoming extremely important when we start thinking about things like IoT in the industrial world, simply because IoT is so completely different and it's so hard for traditional buyers to wrap their head around that. It is incredibly important to take every one of your wins that you've had in those segments and be able to tell those stories to new prospective buyers. And if you don't have a marketing team that's able to do that, definitely think about ways to solve that. That's something that you need to have in your roadmap, simply because that is the modern marketing function. And for industrial, that's a major, major shift from the way that we viewed marketing in the past, which is, hey, they're the coloring in department, they make flyers, they plan counter days. That doesn't work anymore. That's not something that's applicable, especially in the modern digital journey. So that is one thing I constantly reiterate to folks in the industrial space is just simply to solve for that. In terms of what type of content to create, video is absolute king right now. Things like podcasts are also extremely valuable and extremely easy to start. Years ago, you would have to have a full production studio to do this. Now you can literally record on the audio recorder on your phone. And there's plenty of platforms you can upload. There's some easy ways to get started. If anyone's interested in that, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I can give you some tips on how to get started. But podcasts are low-hanging fruit. Figuring out ways to produce video, even if it's with your phone. We've got some great, actually had a webinar a few weeks ago that was all about video marketing. And one of the things we talked about was how to start creating video with basically nothing. If you just have your cell phone and a simple LED light, there are always ways to get started. Another great thing that we're seeing, and this is an actual example, webinars. So in the absence of more in-person events, you've got to start thinking digital, and you've got to start thinking about how to engage prospects in a digital way. Webinars are a fantastic way to do that. LinkedIn Live, Paul and I were actually talking about this before the webinar, to start utilizing some things like YouTube Live and LinkedIn Live. But those are great ways for marketers to engage with potential prospects. And then using all of those to manage the demand generation activities to fill the top of the funnel. So again, when you're thinking about your channels, whether that's social, paid, Google, organic, think about what's producing the best leads, measuring that impact, and then iterating on it. And what I mean by, where's the balance of CPL? CPL is cost per lead, by the way, if you're not familiar with that term. So where's a balance between the cost of the leads that you're getting versus the quality? So a lot of times you can go get a bunch of cheap leads, but they're not necessarily really valuable. That's another thing that really comes into focus when you're distributing content, is what the quality is versus your CPL. And then also looking at your customer acquisition cost, which is CAC, CAC. So reducing and optimizing, what does it take for me to spend marketing dollars to create content, attract people through the funnel, and then ultimately convert them to clients. That is a metric you should 100% be tracking in your roadmap and your strategy. All that really has to be done with your Martech stack. And what we mean by the Martech stack is things like your CRM system, your marketing automation system, your sales enablement system, and having all those systems collect data that's easy to see, easy to report, so that you have a very simple ability to go in and look at those data points, because that's going to be integral in making sure that you're on the right path. And then finally, if you're at the point where you're creating ad strategies, again, making sure that those are aligned with buying intent. One very, very common thing I see is, somebody creates a video or a piece of content and they try to jam it down every channel. And, somebody who's going to Google to actively search for something like, hey, I need an IoT industrial, motors and controls drive solution, and they're actively Googling that, they want to see very, very different content versus someone who is casually scrolling through their LinkedIn feed. They're not actively looking to purchase anything. It's more about creating awareness. I see B2B marketers get that wrong all the time. They'll take, high intent approach to something like LinkedIn, or they'll take brand content and they'll put it over, and do Google paid search, and it just doesn't work out very well. So again, thinking about how you apply the content that you create to the type of intent that your buyer has. Are they actively looking to buy, or are they just interested in learning more? So let's see, my slides are moving kind of slow. Okay, here we go. So kind of wrap that up. The one thing I will say from a marketing standpoint in any content you create is it has to be about telling a story. And at the end of the day, we're all still humans, right? Stories are the best way to convey your value to your clients. That's why I'm a huge fan of customer testimonials and case studies. But really, when you think about the new industrial revolution, the digital industrial revolution, storytelling of that, it's the most complex, emotive story that has ever been told in B2B. And those that do it well are really making impacts. But it can be challenging. But thinking about how to boil that down into telling a story, not just about, for instance, lighting or motor control, or how to operate a conveyor more efficiently at the tactical level, but rather the greater piece of that. And when it comes to IoT, there's just so many opportunities to tell those emotive stories. So it's one thing I constantly stress is don't lose sight of that. in your marketing activities. So any questions on that before we move to our next section here?
No questions right now. We did have a couple of new people join. So just for those who are joining recently, we do have a question and answer chat below. If at any moment you have any questions, or if there's anything you want to learn more about, simply drop us a question there and we'll respond to it. But nothing as of right now, Dave.
Okay, great.
There were some good points there, though, around, I think video is a very important one on that last topic there. I know we're starting to see it used a lot more these days. Not, I wouldn't say as much in industrials, but it's definitely one of the mediums, or one of the strategies we've been seeing cut through the noise, right? So that stat that you brought up there with 70% of the buyer's journey being taken up, I think that's an important one too, right? Because there's such little playing field left for the seller at the end of the day. You only have so much of that buyer's journey left that you need to make an influence on their decision making. And so that's important to know that. So I think that's some good points there of really finding where your customer is at and then applying that content in the right way to get their attention.
Yeah. And again, getting channels mixed up is something I see a lot, but video, again, and we'll put this in the resources when we send out the follow-up email, but definitely check out one of our recent podcasts and webinars about video production, video marketing. It has never been more simple to get involved in video right now. And it's such a powerful, impactful way to create marketing content. You can literally do it with your phone. For those of you that are joining and maybe didn't catch the first part of that, it's so simple to do, even with an iPhone or Android, some simple lighting, but it can be one of the most powerful things you can do to really juice your marketing efforts.
And that's both on the sales and marketing front, right? Being able to engage marketing videos or engage your buyer from creating a 1-minute sales video. So a lot of good different applications.
Absolutely. Yeah. And honestly, Paul, I'd like, once we kind of get down to the sales part, I'd like to get some of your insights. Paul actually has done an incredible job with our team of using video for sales in some of our prospecting, and then also for buyers that are further down the funnel. And it has been extremely powerful for us. So Paul, later when the time is right, we can share some examples of how you've used video art and video from that perspective.
Sounds good.
So as a quick review for those who might just now be joining, the first couple of points we've covered. So sales and marketing alignment is the first step in your roadmap, making sure you have your teams aligned. The second point is really about creating great content and then figuring out how you have channels to distribute that and use it to build funnel. Now we're going to start talking about how you begin to look at data from those activities, both in marketing and sales, to interpret and then use that to guide your strategy. So we'll hit the next slide here. And again, a lot of this information I'm condensing from our ebook, but if you want to download the ebook after we wrap up here, it will give you a lot more background on this. But there's a couple of big segments of data I want to talk about. So first of all, your customer segmentation and just your overall market data. And, from a traditional perspective, that could just be, overall SIC code data for markets by geography. But in the modern sense of learning how to target and market to individuals, it's a lot more than those basic attributes. A lot of this is about building an ideal customer profile and then understanding how to go and reach out to those individuals in a digital fashion, right? So it's not just geographic data and SIC code data, it's getting even further down into that. If you're running ads and doing paid on things like LinkedIn, there's a lot of tools to help you figure this out. So LinkedIn's got some really good targeting where you can be very specific about the customer segments you want to reach and target to, and it can help you ensure that you're reaching your right audiences. But thinking about how you aggregate your customers into those segments is extremely important. You may have several different ideal customer profiles, depending on what type of solutions that you sell, but creating and building content around them is important. And then looking at the data based on how you are engaging and getting stickiness with those customers. And that could be things as far as like website visits, LinkedIn content engagements, ad engagements, of course, because you're going to have a lot of data to collect there. But having all of that roll up under your ideal customer profiles and your customer segments is extremely important. Of course, you're going to want to have your accounts, sales history and product information. This is something that we used to do in distribution a lot. We would go through and we would look at accounts in our ERP and our CRM system and start to identify, not only trends of like, hey, are we starting to see drop off an account, or is that a potential sign of seeing someone go to a competitor? But most importantly, we would start looking at product gap information. So if you have your CRM system in place or your ERP and you're able to get access to this, one easy piece of low-hanging fruit is looking at a customer and, let's say, an ideal customer profile of industrial automation. Okay. So maybe you're an electrical distributor, you're selling lots of wire to them, lots of, sort of accessories or tools or whatever, but you're missing a big piece of, let's say, switchgear or breakers or drives and control. It's very easy to start to understand based on what a customer's total revenue is or what their sales volume is there a gap? And when you start to see those disproportionate product gaps, it's a really easy way to say, oh, hey, well, we know that ABC company is a prime candidate for us to go talk about or target to bring them sort of into a sales cycle for industrial automation and control based on what we've looked at their product sales history. So definitely keep an eye on that. It can really help you glean some insights. Other data you can look at, of course, is just lead generation data, as well as new prospect lists. And so again, one common pitfall you can get into with traditional industrial B2B is calling on the same customers you've called on for years, right? So you've got great relationships, you've got a piece of their wallet, but thinking about how you go beyond that for new systems like IoT, it's going to look very different. Okay. So what your traditional customer base, how they're sort of, positioned demographically as a customer as a whole may look a lot different than the type of company you're going to sell IoT solutions to. So looking at ways to, again, going back to customer segmentation, building those ideal customer profiles, and then looking at your lead generation data to understand, are we attracting the right type of customers? Do we need to change something in our targeting? As well as thinking about how efficiently you're leading those individuals through the funnel. So having data on that is extremely important. It can help guide you down the path. Individual contact data. So this is pretty much a no-brainer, but if you are new to having a CRM, or if you don't have a CRM, this is the foundational building block, right? You want to understand who your leads are, who your key contacts are at each of your accounts, have information on those individuals, know what they're doing, right? So if you're using systems like marketing automation that can help you understand, are those prospects visiting my website? Are they engaging in my email campaigns? Are my salespeople actually going to have meetings with them? All of that type of data that you collect in your CRM and marketing automation needs to reflect all the way down to that individual contact level for you as a leader to start thinking about, am I creating the right types of strategies to reach those individuals? And that ties hand in hand with number 5 here, which is customer engagement data, which this again should include any touch points that you have with those customers, either on the marketing or the sales front. And right back to that alignment, it's extremely important to know, for sales to know, what has marketing been doing with my clients, what sort of engagement, and giving your salespeople access to that data. Vice versa, it's very important for your marketing team to have access to data to understand what sales teams are doing. So once we start talking about the systems here next, we'll talk a lot about how systems like sales enablement can sort of be a bridge gap in that. It can give marketers a much better insight into what's going on with sales. And then vice versa, marketing can also use that data to help inform their marketing automation campaigns and give just much better two-way visibility between those two teams.
Hey, Dave, I think just on that point there's a good question here that was asked on the best ways of collecting that data. So what are the best ways to collect that data? I guess that bridges perfectly into this section.
Yeah, no, it really does. And so we'll talk about that sort of in supporting systems. The short answer to that is making sure you have the right systems in place. So from a marketing perspective, the most important system you can have is marketing automation. So that's going to be something like a Marketo, Salesforce's version is Pardot, or HubSpot. So we are HubSpot users. I'm a huge fan of HubSpot. It's a platform that can work for small businesses all the way up to enterprise businesses. So it's much less important, I would say, on what system you pick. They all can do essentially similar things, but rather having a system that fits your strategy. So for marketers, you need to have that in place. For sales, you really need to focus on your CRM and making sure your data is clean. Most B2B companies, the CRM system data is sort of a nightmare, just to be honest. And so having some focus around, making sure your salespeople know what the process is to input data when they have meetings. That's hard. And one of the things you can do to sort of eliminate the complexity is to put something like sales enablement in place, because it can do a lot of that for the salesperson. So it can automatically record engagements. When they're sharing content and information with their clients, it's collecting data on that. It's automatically syncing that up to your CRM. Vice versa, the data out of your CRM is automatically syncing over to your sales enablement system to help inform activities. So the data collection really sort of becomes the easy part. The hard part is knowing which systems to put in place and then having a process by which to manage those. And that's what we're going to talk about now. Before I go further into that, Paul, was there any more to that question or any other questions we had to answer on that?
It was just on the data and the best ways to collect it. So I think that was a good answer. And then I think this section here will definitely talk a little bit more about that process and where each one of those collections of data fits into that process.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And one challenge too, and you see this data point here on the slide, there's over 7,000 different Martech platforms today. So one of the most common errors I see in B2B is throwing technology at a problem. So, hey, we want to do, more to manage our sales process. Oh, let's throw a CRM system in place, right? Or, hey, we want to do more to capture, lead traffic from our website. So let's throw a chatbot on there. And all of those things are fine as long as you have a strategy. But the biggest problem I see is starting with technology in mind versus starting with a problem to fix in mind, and then building your strategy around how you're going to fix that problem. So the three integral systems that I would recommend to anyone are simply having a CRM, which is going to be your backbone. It is going to be the skeleton of everything that you do in sales and marketing. Marketing automation, which is going to empower your marketing teams, again, to be very, very efficient, collect data and do activities at scale. And then sales enablement, which is essentially the sales equivalent of marketing automation. It puts automation into the hands of salespeople. It allows them to have suggested activities. It delivers content, training, and sales resources just in time, when and where they need it, based on what clients they're engaging with. And it allows them to share information with their clients that lead them through the sales cycle. So again, going back to using that content that we know is so important for buyers, sales enablement automates that content sharing and then gives salespeople a tremendous amount of data about how their customers engage with that content. So we'll go a little further into each of those, but that's sort of each of these at a nutshell. So as I mentioned, CRM really needs to be the center of your tech stack. If you have not put a CRM in place, that's step one, right? If you don't have a CRM, it's going to be hard really for anything you're going to do digital to be effective. And just some data to show you the value of that, because I know there are still a lot of B2B industrial companies out there that have not made that step. All this data is a collection mostly from what we've got from Salesforce.com, but your return is really high. So it's basically an $8.71 return for every dollar spent on implementing a CRM system. The effectiveness of sales organizations, to be practicing CRM usage, the really, really effective sales teams are 81% more likely to be using CRMs. And again, that's partially the result of the CRM, but I would also argue that it's really indicative of their strategy. So it's not just the CRM system that made them so much more effective. It's having a plan, executing that plan, and having the CRM be a part of it. That's why you see those numbers be so high. And then, that equates into 29% higher sales productivity, so up to 34% higher sales productivity. And then certainly the big indicator for sales leadership is just the ability to manage more accurate forecasts. Forecast accuracy can go up by 42%. I think that's probably a conservative number. I would argue that it's even higher than that, simply because if you don't have a place to see and manage your pipeline, how do you know what's going on, right? So CRM is extremely, extremely important, and it is the backbone of all of the record keeping. So when you're thinking about how to tie in marketing automation and sales enablement, all of that needs to relate back to where you keep those master records and customer contact information, and that is your CRM. So it's the most important investment you can have. The two big recommendations I would give you: number one, Salesforce.com, they're the market leader for a reason, but also HubSpot. And again, a lot of people think about HubSpot just as marketing automation, but they have an extremely powerful CRM system as well. I have seen industrial companies, in fact, I know one that's close to 2 billion with a B in revenue that's still using HubSpot extremely efficiently. And they probably aren't even using all of the power that it has. So if you're looking to do something that's centralized in one place, I would certainly recommend taking a look at HubSpot. Marketing automation. So again, we're really seeing exponential growth now with industrial B2B. Marketing automation is something that's been used in B2C for years, but the power it gives you to scale and operate so much more efficiently and make sure that your marketing content is being deployed, your emails are being managed, your website traffic, landing pages, all of that in one place is extremely important. Most B2B buyers are, again, performing 8 to 12 online searches. That goes right back to us talking about 70% of that buying journey being upfront. So because they're, going through so much of that on their own, marketing automation is the place to capture that data. So how they're engaging with your website, what kind of landing page hits you're getting, what your ads are doing. So good marketing automation system will have integration to look at all your ad campaigns and pull in data and information from those engagements. All that rolls up. Digital is a huge influencer across everything we do. Marketing automation is a centerpiece for that. And then also just from a lead perspective, marketing automation can not only help you generate more leads, but it can help you have higher conversion because you actually have a place to nurture those leads. One extremely common challenge I hear in industrial B2B is, hey, we got a bunch of leads, but none of them converted. And we don't really know why. And when you pull back the curtain, it's because no one really did anything with them. They came through the website, they got handed over a salesperson who put them at the bottom of their inbox. They handled everything else first. They forgot to call them on time. Maybe they reached back out to them a month later. They had already figured out, or made a buying decision somewhere else. So having a process to manage those leads when they come in is extremely, extremely important. And marketing automation can automate that for you. That's why it's called marketing automation. So it gives you the ability to do things at scale that you can never do manually. And then the last thing is sales enablement. And I've talked about this a little bit. There's a lot of great platforms out there. Ours is designed specifically for industrial B2B. And that's one of the reasons we created some of the features in it that we did, but just because B2B is such a longer sales cycle. But at the core basis, your sales enablement system should allow your sales and marketing teams to keep a good record of content, have a system to deploy that content to sales reps, again, when and where they need it. So it needs to operate on any device. It needs to be easy to use. And that content needs to be served up to them in such a way that it's relevant to their current activities. So to give you an example of what that really looks like, if your sales enablement system is plugged into your CRM, the data from your CRM can help inform your sales enablement system to say, hey, we recommend that you use this presentation today with ABC Oil Company because we know they're in this market. We've got the data from CRM. We know they're at this stage of the buying cycle. Again, we've got that data from the CRM. We know this person's job title, again, because we got that data from the CRM. And then now the sales enablement system is automatically recommending to the sales rep what content should be shared, what presentation should be used, what sales training they may need to go over or refresh themselves with before they walk into that meeting. All of those things can be done with sales enablement and in an automated way versus a manual way. So that is why those three systems are really so paramount to be using in conjunction. So Paul, any questions on that before we?
No questions. I think you bring up some really good points there. And one of the things I wanted to say, and you mentioned this to me all the time when we get into conversations, it's throwing technology at a problem will never solve it. It all comes down to the process and the strategy behind it. What makes me laugh when you say it is it's like buying a treadmill or a new Peloton and never using it. It's going to eventually just be a laundry rack in the corner of your room. And so good technology often goes to waste when you don't have a process or a strategy. And I don't think that when we talk about these systems, I don't think we're saying you need to implement them all at the same time and do everything all at once. Successful teams will kind of stagger their deployments with these technologies and get the CRM set up first, then get the marketing automation deployed, and then add the sales enablement platform on the end. So there's a process to all of this, and that is where I place a lot of the emphasis is making sure that that strategy and that process is correct.
Yeah, could not agree more. And in fact, one of the things, and I think I even wrap up with this slide, is, the old parable of, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is now. That is how you should approach anything that you're doing on this roadmap. Making slow, well thought out progressions are so much better than trying to do too much at one time. And I've seen a lot of B2B companies fail on that as well, right? Like they say, hey, we're going to do CRM and we're going to do marketing automation. We're going to do all these things at once. I've been guilty of that. I've made some bad decisions like that in prior roles that I've had where you try to run a lot of strategies in parallel, and instead of doing any one of them great, you do all of them. So doing things in a well thought out, organized manner, not throwing technology at a problem, making sure that you have a reason and a strategy to be doing anything with technology is the most paramount thing you can do. And so again, CRM needs to be first. You really need to have marketing automation right after that, and then sales enablement. I'd say that you can argue either way that those are sort of parallel. But from a marketing perspective, I would always kind of choose the marketing automation first. But it can be different for your business. It really can be different based on how you're going to market, and finding good partners to coach you through that is extremely important. So, if you're talking to somebody like Salesforce or HubSpot, make sure you're talking to an expert that can help guide you. We certainly do that. When we're talking to sales enablement clients, we don't just try to sell software. We try to understand their business and make it fit. Same thing with marketing automation. It's one of the reasons I love HubSpot so much. They do such a good job of coaching individuals through what that process looks like, because that's what you don't see. There's a lot of other people out there that are creating content like us, webinars about, hey, here's your roadmap, here's what you need to do. That's nice and shiny on the surface. It gets really hard when you get down into the tactics. So making sure that you can break that stuff down into bite-size pieces is going to be really important for your success. And communication. Communicate early, communicate often. To make sure that those initiatives don't die on the vine inside of the organization. So any other questions we had, Paul, before we move on?
Not right now, no.
Okay. So one of the last points we're going to get to here is just sales team training and development. So important in the new normal. And sales training looks so much different than it did pre-COVID as well. If you want to get further into this, Paul and I actually did a webinar, what was it, 2 weeks ago when we had Christine Sizemore. So we had a president, Christine Sizemore, who's the president of a Sandler sales training franchise here in the Southeast, joined us for a really great conversation about how to handle sales training in the new normal. So if you want to dive further into this, I'll also include a link to that in the resources I send out. But just as an overall summary, on-demand training now is flourishing. And this is for a number of reasons. Number one, we have a lot more hybrid work or fully remote work going on post-COVID. So having systems that can deliver your sales training on demand is important. And traditional LMS does an okay job of this. I mean, the challenge, I would say, and I've been a salesperson, I've been a field sales rep and a VP of sales. I can tell you, no salesperson just wants to go into a system and do training. It's just the way it is. So trying to find ways to deliver that training on demand to them versus just giving them a course load and saying, hey, go take 15 sales courses is always a better approach. Again, this is a place that sales enablement can fill the gap, because then it's delivered when and where you need it. It's not, hey, here's a a syllabus of stuff you need to go knock out in an LMS. But if you don't have digital or on-demand training, that's the first place I would start. How do you start to create some digital training for your sales teams? Digital touch points as well, just from a coaching standpoint. One of the most simple ways to make sure that you're keeping good in touch with your sales reps that are remote, use Zoom, use FaceTime, use anything you can use to see the individual that you're speaking with. If they're not in the office every day, if you're providing coaching and training and insights, is absolutely paramount. And I would try to do that as often as you can and make cadences to do that as well. So setting up time every week or every month or however you need to do that with your teams is extremely important. And then again, going back to on demand, if you have other digital touch points like LMS system or sales enablement that can deliver that training, look at the data. Make sure your salespeople are actually engaging with it and are actually utilizing it. Suggest it to your team. So, I may say to Paul, "Hey, Paul, I see that you've struggled a little bit on conversions with this group of accounts, and maybe you don't understand our value prop well enough. Go check out this training to make sure that you're going to understand how to really position that solution." So all of that is becoming much more digital. Change management just in general is front and center, but because people are making a major shift away from traditional coaching and training, that is really important. Systems being blended into your daily activities. So again, things like sales enablement, making recommendations, having things even tied into your CRM systems, and just knowledge management in general. Platforms like Notion and Guru that are providing information, knowledge bases that employees can really quickly access to just get information quickly, right? So maybe I don't need to go take a whole training course. I just need to know, hey, how has somebody else handled this exact same challenge with a client? It's so important. And so those systems being blended into the way that you operate on the day-to-day is very important. And we've seen that expanding rapidly. And then also coaching your reps on how to use digital. And the biggest piece of low-hanging fruit, and I say this all the time, LinkedIn is the most underutilized platform for B2B sales reps because there's so much opportunity. If I forget what the actual data was of how many billions of people that are actually signed up with active LinkedIn profiles, but the content that is created is literally created by like less than 2% of all the people that are on LinkedIn. So what that means is if you just pick up your phone and create a post, something engaging, right? Don't just reshare a product release from your marketing team, but ask a thought, provide some insight, record a video of yourself, upload it. If you're a sales rep, you already are in the top 2% right out of the gate. Even if your content sucks, even if your post isn't the best, taking that first step is so important. And utilizing those platforms can pay big dividends. I've seen a lot of individuals in smaller businesses start to utilize video, start to utilize LinkedIn and sharing post-pandemic, and it has paid huge dividends for their business. Now, it won't do it overnight, so don't expect to just start creating and sharing on LinkedIn that things are going to happen immediately, but it is the absolute best way that you can ingrain value in the minds of your buyers and your prospects specifically to build credibility that you're an expert in that field. So I would 100% talk about that with your teams. Make sure you're training them and giving them resources on how to use those platforms so that they can be successful. But definitely go check out that other webinar if you're interested. It's available on demand. Christine does a great job of talking through all of these elements of the new normal in training. Anything you wanted to add on to that, Paul, just from your own experience in sales?
No, I think that you covered the 2 points that I was going to add there, which was really having on-demand training content. I think that we're realizing a lot of reps, a lot of teams want self-serve content, right? So being at home or being on the road or visiting a customer site or whatever, and having that access to content right away. So I think it's very important, especially with the stat we pulled up a couple of slides ago with the millennials coming into the workforce now. Millennials are definitely self-service types of people. They want their content on demand and at their fingertips. And so traditional training The training sessions are still popular, but we're seeing a lot more self-serve and on-demand content as well that they can just access right away at their fingertips.
Yeah, completely agree. So, okay, well, if there's no other questions on that, we'll get right to our last point and start to wrap up here. But really, the finale here around better customer conversations is really just a amalgamation of everything else that we've talked about, right? So if you're doing all of these other things, having better customer conversations is the output of doing all of the activities we mentioned earlier in this webinar. Better conversations with your prospects is centered around adapting to that new journey. So if you're just doing that inherently, you're already ahead. But the first step is aligning your sales and marketing teams. So making sure that you have good collaboration and execution between them. Creating great content. And this is both marketing and sales. And we literally just wrapped up talking about how salespeople need to be trained to use digital tools. Creating great content is no longer just the needs and the requirements of the marketing team. I think every salesperson should be doing it as well. Implementing the right systems. Don't throw technology at a problem, but make sure that you have a well planned out strategy for the problems you need to solve in your business, and then be very selective and deliberate about choosing the technology to wrap around that. The three big systems in review, CRM is number one, first and foremost. If you're a marketer, you absolutely need to think about marketing automation. And if you're a sales leader, you absolutely need to be thinking about sales enablement. Those two systems are the best plugins to CRM to help make things work better. And then finally, again, data measurement and guidance of your reps. So making sure that you have your reporting set up correctly, you're understanding how to allow that data to guide your business process and your roadmap, and then chatting with and informing and coaching your reps to lead to that outcome. And each of those, like we said, are very difficult. So starting small and moving deliberately is the best thing that you can do. One thing I'll share here and wrap up as well is just some of the common pitfalls that I've seen from organizations who are trying to do this and where they can fail. The absolute number one is lack of executive buy-in. So if you are a marketing leader or if you are a sales leader and you're bringing these suggestions to your executive team, your board, your CEO, if you don't achieve buy-in at the top, you are already set up on a path that is going to be very, very difficult. So aligning all of those individuals who are going to be involved in the business strategy is paramount. In tandem with that, in a lot of cases, I've seen companies fall into potholes when they just say and don't do. So, you may have a CEO or a president that says, yes, we want to be digital. We want to do all these things, but there's no accountability put in place. There's no strategy execution below that individual, and then that person's not held accountable. So making sure that you have a plan. Don't talk about your plan. Go execute on your plan. Number three, and we've said this a lot, throwing software at a problem, don't do it. It never ends up well. Make sure you have a strategy. Failing to establish that accountability, again, goes right back in hand with saying, not doing. So making sure that you have metrics to ensure that your strategies are being executed. That's extremely important. And then not putting in place champions for functional units. So if you're going to do a CRM deployment, especially if you're a larger organization, say over $250, $500 million in revenue, you need to put in a champion to manage that process, even if it's a temporary individual. And I've seen even bigger companies. When I'll give you a real life example. When I was at General Electric in their energy division, we did a CRM rollout, and we literally went and grabbed one of our top performing ops managers and said, hey, your job for the next 6 months is managing this deployment of the CRM. And it went much, much better than it would have if we had not had an individual in place. So just from a cash flow perspective, you don't have to go hire someone or create a new job. In many cases, you can reallocate that person. Same thing with marketing. If you've got somebody that's deploying marketing operations, make sure you've got someone to handle it. In my old organization, I actually hired a role for an individual that was a digital ops manager, and I put that on her plate to make sure that that was done, and we had a champion internally. And then the same thing for sales enablement. I will tell you, most of our most successful clients that we work with have someone in that organization that is a functional champion, even if it's not their full-time job. That individual has the oversight, the accountability, and is expected to perform at the levels of the metrics set out to ensure that those things go well. So, Paul, any thoughts you wanted to add into that before we get ready to wrap up?
No, not right now. I think that you've covered it.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I said this earlier, so I kind of spoiled a little bit for the final here. But again, the best thing I can recommend to you is, thinking about where to start and moving slow. The past is always the best time to have started something, but the important thing is making the decision to do it now, and to do it deliberately, and to do it in slow, manageable steps that will allow you to get to those outcomes, versus trying to hurry up and do something that's not going to work out very well. So with that, I know we're getting close to time. I think we got about 4 minutes left. We'll do some open Q&A, and if anybody wants to hang on further, we're happy to stay on and answer questions as well. So we have anything come in?
Not yet. The Q&A is just below. If there are any questions outstanding, please drop them in there and we'll answer them. Also, you'll get a copy and recording of this webinar too. So if you've signed up, you will receive this so you can watch it back on your own on demand.
Okay, sounds good.
I don't think we have any questions coming in. We'll give it a minute here, Dave, and
we'll hang out for
hang on. Yeah.
Comes in, we'll handle. One final note as well, tomorrow morning, we'll send out a recap email. So it will include a on-demand link to watch this webinar if you want to go back and review any of the topics. And we're going to put just a portfolio of helpful resources in there as well. So we'll link to a lot of those other webinars I've mentioned, a lot of those other pieces of content, our ebooks, our articles. So that should help you get on your way. One thing as well, I'll also include information for myself and for Paul. I'll put our LinkedIn profiles in there. I love engaging and talking with individuals just one-on-one on LinkedIn. So if there's anything that you want to talk about further, shoot me a direct message. I'd be happy to set up some time and chat with you about any of these topics if you'd like to go in a little further. And I know Paul would do the same. So
for sure.
All right. Any last call for questions? Anything we've had come in?
Nothing yet, but if you're still in the room and you have a question and we're about to end this, I think you can always connect with us on LinkedIn. So I don't think we have anything coming through for today, Dave, but they know where we're at. And if you guys want to connect with us, we'll go from there.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much to everyone for joining, and we will be sending out the review email tomorrow morning.
Thanks so much. Take care, everybody.